Commander Rex Sterling had gambled everything he owned on an abandoned Celestial-class cruiser, and this ship might be the newest one in the entire galaxy. The problem was he didn't know the actual flight hours logged. Today, we were going to discover if he'd made the deal of his lifetime or gotten himself into the biggest disaster of his career. The hangar bay of Station Cerberus 9 stretched endlessly before us, its atmospheric shields humming with that familiar low frequency that made your teeth ache if you stood too close. I'm Captain Marcus Gallagher, but everyone calls me Mac, and I run the most successful ship restoration facility this side of the Andromeda Spiral. When Rex called me about this find, I thought he'd finally lost it. A Celestial class with only 4,000 hours, these ships were worth more than most planetary colonies when new. "Mac, you've got to see this," Rex had told me over the comm 3 weeks ago. "Admiral Whitmore swears this cruiser has only 4,000 hours on the engines, says nobody's even sat in the observation deck." Admiral Constance Whitmore. Now, there was a name that carried weight in the fleet. Retired after 40 years of distinguished service, medals enough to sink a cargo hauler, and notorious for being particular about everything. When she'd contacted Rex through the Collector's network about selling her personal cruiser, he jumped at the chance. The Admiral had kept the ship in her private hangar for 15 years, she claimed, barely touching the controls. The story went that she'd bought it right before her retirement, planning grand tour of the outer systems. But health issues kept her grounded on Station Cerberus, and the beautiful ship just sat there gathering cosmic dust and stellar radiation marks. She'd refused to let Rex bring an engineer to verify the hours, insisted on handling everything through secured channels, and then made him wait 2 whole years before finally releasing the docking codes. Standing in my restoration bay now, looking at the ship for the first time in person, I felt that familiar tingle of both excitement and suspicion. The Celestial Starburst 7, registry number November Charlie 1701, gleamed under our work lights. From a distance, she looked pristine. The hull's chromium steel composite caught the light like liquid mercury. The viewing ports showed no micrometeorite scoring, and even the manufacturer's emblem on the bow looked factory fresh. My lead engineer, Lieutenant Jasper Hawkins, everybody called him Jazz, whistled low as he circled the ship with his scanner. "Boss, either this is the luckiest ship in the galaxy, or something's not adding up. No ship sits for 15 years and looks like this." "Run a full spectrum analysis," I told him, "every inch of her." Rex stood beside me, his weathered face showing the strain of his investment. At 63, he'd been collecting and trading ships for 30 years. This was his biggest gamble yet. He'd liquidated his entire collection, sold his stake in 3 asteroid mining operations, even mortgaged his apartment on Mars Colony 7, all based on the word of an elderly admiral who wouldn't even let him properly inspect the merchandise. "She seemed so certain, Mac," Rex said, running his hand through his silver hair. "You should have heard her. She knew every specification, every feature. She talked about this ship like it was her child." "Well, we're about to find out if Mama was telling the truth or selling you a fairy tale," I said, pulling on my work gloves. "Jazz, fire up the diagnostic array. Let's see what we're really dealing with." As we approached closer, the illusion of perfection started to crack. The landing struts showed significant wear, scratches deep enough to catch your fingernail. The engine cowlings, which had looked immaculate from 20 feet away, revealed heat discoloration patterns when you got close. And the smell, that distinct combination of ozone, hydraulic fluid, and recycled air that every spacer knew, it was wrong somehow. Too strong for a ship that supposedly barely flew. "Boss," Jazz called from underneath the ship, "you need to see this." I slid under on a hover pad and immediately saw what he meant. The thermal shielding on the engine housings was intact, but showed clear signs of extended use. The characteristic blue-white streaking that came from multiple atmospheric entries, the microfractures in the heat dispersal veins that only developed after thousands of hours at maximum burn. "This doesn't look like 4,000 hours to me," Jazz muttered, recording everything with his helmet cam. "No," I agreed, "but let's not jump to conclusions. Sometimes these patterns can develop from sitting idle too. Thermal cycling from the station's day-night temperature variations can mimic flight stress." Back topside, we continued our initial inspection. The main airlock cycled open smoothly, but the control pad was worn smooth where fingers had touched it thousands of times. Inside, the contradiction deepened. The command deck looked showroom new at first glance. The captain's chair still had its protective covering partially attached. The navigation console's displays were crystal clear, no burn-in from extended use. But step into the crew quarters, and it was a different story. The environmental controls were covered in a film that looked suspiciously like mold. The food prep station surfaces felt sticky to the touch, and the recreation room's atmosphere recycler was making sounds no healthy system should make. "It's like two different ships," Rex said, bewildered. "How can the command deck be perfect and the living quarters be like this?" "Could be she only used certain areas," I suggested, though I didn't really believe it myself. "Or maybe there's been some selective restoration work done." The real moment of truth would come when we powered up the main computer and checked the actual logged hours. Every celestial class had triple redundant hour meters, impossible to fake or reset without leaving obvious traces. But before we could do that, we needed to clean this bird thoroughly. You never knew what 15 years of neglect might have done to the systems, and I wasn't about to risk a cascade failure by powering up a contaminated computer core. "All right, people," I announced to my crew of 12 specialists who'd assembled in the bay. "We're going full restoration protocol. I want every system cleaned, checked, and certified before we even think about hitting that main power switch." My restoration process was legendary in the business, refined over 20 years of bringing dead ships back to life. First, we tackled the engine compartment, where the condition of the components would tell us more about the ship's real history than any computer log. The level of carbon scoring on the injection chambers, the wear patterns on the magnetic containment rings, these things didn't lie. "Henderson, Rodriguez," I called to two of my best techs, "start with the primary thrusters. I want every piece cataloged and analyzed. If this ship really only has 4,000 hours, those components should still show factory markers." While they got to work, I started what I called the Sterling score, a running tally displayed on the bay's main screen. Every piece of evidence that supported Admiral Whitmore's claim would add a point in Rex's favor. Every contradiction would subtract one. It was a bit theatrical, sure, but it helped keep the crew engaged and Rex from packing holes in my deck plates. The first discovery came within minutes. Henderson pulled out a thrust vector control module, holding it up to the light. "Mac, look at this. The serial number's crisp, the housing's barely worn. This is either original with minimal use, or it's the best counterfeit I've ever seen." I examined it closely. He was right. The module looked almost new. "That's 1 point for Rex," I announced, updating the board. But then Rodriguez found something troubling. "Boss, the coolant system's been replaced. This isn't original equipment, and it's not military spec. Someone put in a civilian-grade system, probably half the quality of what should be here." "Why would anyone downgrade the coolant system?" Rex asked. "Usually because the original failed and military spec replacements are worth more than some entire ships," I explained. "That's a point against, I'm afraid." As the hours passed, my team worked through the ship systematically. We used industrial-grade molecular scrubbers on the engine components, revealing metal that gleamed like new beneath the accumulation of years. The structural integrity scanners showed no stress fractures in the frame, unusual for any ship over a few thousand hours. But then we'd find something like non-regulation repair patches on the fuel lines, or discover that half the navigation sensors had been replaced with aftermarket parts. The score stayed frustratingly even, 6 points for, 6 against. Mac, Jazz called from the computer core room. I've got something weird here. The main processing unit is pristine, but look at these data storage modules. I made my way through the cramped access tunnel to where Jazz was working. The computer core of a celestial class was a thing of beauty, crystalline matrices suspended in null gravity fields, processing information at speeds that made human thought look glacial. This one was no exception, the main unit glowing with that distinctive blue that meant it was in standby mode. See these, Jazz pointed to a bank of memory modules. They've been swapped. These aren't original. They're good, maybe even better than stock, but definitely not factory. Someone upgraded the memory or replaced failed units. Hard to tell without powering up and running diagnostics. This was becoming more puzzling by the hour. The ship showed signs of both minimal use and significant wear, careful maintenance and neglectful abandonment. It was like someone had cherished certain parts while completely ignoring others. Let's move to the exterior, I decided. I want to see what stories the hull can tell us. The washing bay was massive, designed to handle freighters 3 times the size of the Celestial. We positioned the ship on the rotating platform and began the elaborate dance of restoration washing. First came the decontamination phase, critical for any ship that had been sitting in a station hangar. 15 years of accumulated stellar radiation, microscopic debris, and whatever else floated through the ventilation systems needed to be neutralized. My team suited up in their protective gear while I supervised from the control booth. The initial rinse revealed something interesting immediately. Underneath the layer of grime, the hull showed distinct patterns. Some sections gleamed as if they'd never seen hard vacuum, while others showed the telltale pitting of extensive travel through the outer systems where micrometeorite protection was minimal. "Look at that," Rex said, pointing at the main viewing window. "The forward section looks perfect, but the aft quarter looks like it's been through a war." He wasn't wrong. As the cleaning solution did its work, we could see clear evidence of multiple hull repairs on the rear sections, the kind of patches you'd only need if you'd been running the dangerous trade routes where pirates and debris fields were common hazards. Someone took this ship into harm's way, I noted, but tried to hide it with a cosmetic cover-up job on the front sections. The real surprise came when we started on the landing gear wells. My tech, Sarah Chen Davidson, who everyone called Scout despite my requests to use proper names, found something unusual. "Mr. Gallagher, there's cargo residue here. Lots of it." I climbed down to look. She was right. The magnetic clamps in the auxiliary cargo holds showed clear signs of heavy use, the kind of wear you'd only get from regular loading and unloading of freight containers. But this was supposed to be a personal yacht, not a cargo hauler. "Admiral Whitmore was running freight?" Rex asked, incredulous. "Someone was," I confirmed. "This ship's been working for a living, that's for sure." We spent the next 6 hours on the exterior, using every technique in my arsenal: molecular scrubbers for the tough deposits, sonic cleaners for the delicate sensor arrays, and good old-fashioned elbow grease where nothing else would do. Slowly, the ship began revealing its true condition. The paint, what I'd thought was original, turned out to be a recent application, maybe 5 years old at most. Underneath, we found evidence of at least 2 previous paint jobs, including what looked like military camouflage patterns. The registration numbers had been re-etched at least once, though they matched the current documentation. "This ship has lived several lives," I told Rex as we took a break for coffee in my office overlooking the bay. "Whatever the Admiral told you about its history, there's more to the story." Rex stared at his ship, now gleaming under the work lights, but somehow looking more mysterious than ever. Maybe she didn't know. She could have been deceived when she bought it. "Maybe," I agreed, though something about that didn't sit right. Admiral Whitmore had a reputation for being thorough to the point of obsession. It seemed unlikely she'd buy a ship without knowing its complete history. The interior cleaning was where things got really interesting. The mold situation in the living quarters was worse than we'd thought. Whatever had caused it, likely a failure in the environmental systems while the ship sat idle, had spread through the entire ventilation network. We had to run 3 complete decontamination cycles followed by manual scrubbing of every surface. "Boss, you might want to see this," called Tommy Fitzgerald, one of my junior techs from the captain's ready room. I found him standing over an open floor panel, holding something in his gloved hand. It was a data pad, an older model, probably 20 years out of date, but it was still functional, its screen flickering to life when he touched it. Where was this? Hidden under the floor plating. Looks like someone stashed it deliberately. I took the pad and scrolled through its contents. Most of it was encrypted, but there were shipping manifests dated from 10 years ago, showing runs to the outer colonies, dangerous runs, the kind that paid well because most pilots wouldn't risk them. The ship's name on the manifests wasn't Celestial Starburst 7. It was listed as Midnight Runner. "Our plot thickens," I muttered, handing the pad to Rex. "Your pristine yacht used to be a blockade runner." Rex's face went pale. "That's impossible. The Admiral said she bought it new from the shipyard." "Well, either the Admiral was mistaken or she wasn't entirely truthful," I said. "But let's not jump to conclusions. We still haven't checked the hour meters." We returned to the main bay where the rest of my team was finishing up the interior restoration. The transformation was remarkable. What had been a moldy, suspicious-smelling environment now gleamed with cleanliness. The command surfaces shone, the living quarters smelled fresh, and even the cargo bays looked respectable. But I noticed something odd. As we did our final inspection, the captain's chair, which I thought had protective covering, actually had a carefully placed fabric overlay that mimicked the original protective film. Underneath, the seat showed clear wear patterns from extended use. Someone had gone to great lengths to make certain areas of this ship appear newer than they were. "It's like someone was staging it," Jazz observed. "Making it look unused for a buyer," I suggested, glancing at Rex. We found more evidence of this deliberate deception. Chemical treatments on the control panels to restore their shine, careful patches on worn floor plates painted to match the surrounding area, even replacement lights in the crew quarters positioned to hide areas of wear. Someone spent considerable time and money making this ship appear newer than it is, I concluded. This wasn't casual neglect followed by a quick cleanup. This was planned. Rex was looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Mac, I need to know the truth. How many hours does this ship really have?" "Only one way to find out," I said. "Jazz, fire up the main power." The startup sequence for a Celestial class was always impressive. The fusion reactor came online with a deep thrumming that you felt in your bones. Lights flickered on throughout the ship in a carefully orchestrated sequence. The artificial gravity kicked in, making everyone's stomach do that familiar flip. And then, with a sound like a giant taking its first breath, the main computer systems activated. Jazz was at the engineering station, his fingers flying over the controls. Systems coming online, running diagnostics, and there we go, accessing the hour meters now. We all gathered around the main display, Rex gripping my arm hard enough to leave bruises. The numbers appeared on the screen, and I heard Rex's sharp intake of breath. 11,943 hours, Jazz read aloud. The silence in the bay was deafening. Nearly 12,000 hours, 3 times what the Admiral had claimed. Rex's face cycled through emotions. Disappointment, anger, confusion, and finally, oddly enough, relief. "Well," he said finally, "at least now we know." But I wasn't satisfied. Something about those numbers bothered me. "Jazz, run a deep diagnostic on those meters. Check for any signs of tampering or rollback attempts." While he worked, I pulled up the ship's complete maintenance history, now accessible through the main computer. What I found was fascinating. The ship had indeed been the Midnight Runner for the first 8,000 hours of its life, running cargo and passengers to the frontier colonies. Then, about 7 years ago, it had been purchased by a company called Whitmore Holdings. "Rex," I said slowly, "the Admiral didn't lie to you, not exactly." "What do you mean?" "Look at this. The ship was completely overhauled 7 years ago. New engine cores, new navigation systems, new everything. In naval terms, it was given a 0-hour rebuild. When she bought it after that rebuild, it really did only have about 4,000 hours on the new components." Rex studied the records, his expression shifting to understanding. So she was telling the truth from a certain point of view. "The question is," I said, "did she know about the ship's previous life?" A new file popped up on the screen, marked with Admiral Whitmore's personal seal. Jazz had found it buried in the secured partition. I opened it, and we all leaned in to read. It was a personal log dated just 3 months ago. The Admiral's voice came through the speakers, aged but still commanding. "To whoever purchases my ship," the recording began. "If you're hearing this, then you've discovered the truth about the Celestial Starburst 7. Yes, I know about her past as the Midnight Runner. I know about every cargo run, every firefight, every narrow escape she made in her previous life." Rex and I exchanged glances as the recording continued. "I bought her specifically because of that history. You see, my daughter commanded the Midnight Runner. Captain Jennifer Whitmore, one of the finest blockade runners in the galaxy, until she died trying to deliver medical supplies to the Colony 7 outbreak. This ship was all I had left of her." The Admiral's voice cracked slightly, then steadied. "I had her rebuilt, gave her a new name, a new life. I intended to fly her myself, to see the places my daughter saw, but my health failed, and I found I couldn't bear to sit in that captain's chair, knowing she died in it. So the ship sat, and I maintained the fiction that she was barely used because I couldn't bear to tell anyone the truth. I'm sorry for the deception, Mr. Sterling, but you seemed like someone who would appreciate this ship for what she truly is, a veteran with stories to tell and many more years of service left in her. The price I asked was fair for what you're getting, a ship with a new heart but an old soul. Take care of her. She's already been through so much." The recording ended, leaving us all silent. Rex was staring at the ship with new eyes, and I could see his entire perspective shifting. 12,000 hours, he said quietly, "but with a complete rebuild at 8,000. That's actually incredible for a ship this age. Most Celestials need major overhauls at 15,000. "And look at these specs," Jazz added, pulling up the rebuild documentation. "This isn't standard work. They used military-grade components, top-tier everything. This rebuild alone would have cost more than a new ship." I ran my hand along the hull, seeing it differently now. This wasn't just a ship. It was a memorial, a testament to a daughter's sacrifice and a mother's love. The deliberate staging to make it look newer wasn't about deception for profit. It was about preserving a story the Admiral couldn't bear to tell. So I asked Rex, good deal or bad? He laughed, the sound echoing through the bay. "You know what? It's perfect. A ship with history, properly maintained, rebuilt with the best components money can buy, and a story that'll make her the most interesting vessel at any port. Plus," Jazz added, grinning, "she's actually in better shape than most ships with half her hours. That military spec rebuild means she'll run for another 20,000 hours easy." We spent the rest of the day going through the ship with new appreciation. Every scratch and patch told a story of dangerous runs to help desperate colonies. The upgraded memory banks contained logs of hundreds of successful deliveries to worlds other ships wouldn't service. The worn cargo clamps had held medical supplies, food, equipment that saved lives. "Look at this," Scout called from the navigation station. "The star charts. She's been to systems that aren't even on modern maps, frontier territories that got abandoned during the consolidation. Rex was like a kid in a candy store now, discovering new aspects of his purchase with every passing hour. The weapon mountings, cleverly disguised but still functional, spoke of a ship that could defend herself. The hidden compartments, perfect for valuable cargo, or, Rex noted with delight, for his collection of rare stellar artifacts. The oversized fuel tanks that would let her run farther than any standard celestial. "Mac," Rex said as we wrapped up the day's work, "what would you value her at, honestly?" I considered carefully. With that rebuild, the military components, the extended-range modifications, even at 12,000 hours, I'd say you got her for about 60% of her real value. "The Admiral gave me a gift," Rex said quietly. "She could have gotten more anywhere else," I agreed. She wanted someone who'd appreciate what they were getting. Not everyone would understand that a rebuilt runner is worth more than a Garage Queen yacht. As my crew put the finishing touches on the restoration, applying the protective sealants that would keep her looking pristine for years, I reflected on the day's discoveries. In my 20 years of restoration work, I'd seen plenty of deceptions, people trying to pass off junk as treasure. But this was different. This was someone trying to pass off treasure as something ordinary because the true value was too painful to acknowledge. "Jazz," I called, "add something to the ship's official record. Note that the Celestial Starburst 7 incorporates the fully restored and upgraded hull of the legendary Midnight Runner, Captain Jennifer Whitmore commanding. Any buyer or inspector should know they're looking at a piece of frontier history." Rex nodded approvingly. "She deserves to be remembered." We fired up the engines for a full test, and the sound was music to any spacer's ears. Smooth, powerful, with that distinctive harmonic that meant everything was in perfect synchronization. The navigation systems came online flawlessly. The weapons systems, though we couldn't test them in the station, showed green across the board, and the life support hummed with efficiency. "Want to take her for a spin?" I asked Rex. His face lit up like a child's on Christmas morning. "Can we?" "Station Control. This is Restoration Bay 7 requesting clearance for test flight of November Charlie 1701, I called. "Restoration Bay 7, you're cleared for standard test pattern Alpha. Stay within 10,000 kilometers of the station." Rex took the captain's chair, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the controls. I stood at the navigation station while Jazz monitored engineering. As we lifted off from the bay floor and glided through the atmospheric barrier into open space, I could feel the ship wanting to run. She might have been sitting for years, but she remembered what she was built for. "How's she handling?" I asked. "Like a dream," Rex breathed, putting her through gentle maneuvers. "No, better than a dream, like she's been waiting for this." We ran through the standard test patterns, checking acceleration, deceleration, maneuvering thrusters and stabilizers. Everything performed above spec. The military-grade components showed their worth in response times that put factory standards to shame. "Rex," Jazz called from engineering, "you've got to see these power readings. We're running at about 70% efficiency above standard. This rebuild wasn't just restoration, it was an upgrade." As we headed back to the station, Rex was quiet, contemplative. Finally, he spoke. "Mac, I want to hire you for something else." "Oh." "I want to restore her completely. Not just cleaning and maintenance, but really restore her. Find out all her stories, document her history. The Midnight Runner deserves to be remembered properly, not hidden away." I smiled. "I think I know just the historian for that job. Woman named Professor Sarah Blackstone specializes in frontier shipping history. She'd love to get her hands on those logs." "Perfect," Rex said as we glided back into the restoration bay. "And Mac, thanks for everything. You didn't just restore a ship today, you uncovered a legacy." As my crew secured the ship and Rex filled out the final paperwork, I found myself walking around the Celestial one more time. In the captain's ready room, I noticed something we'd missed before. A small plaque hidden behind a panel that had been deliberately placed to conceal it. It read, "In memory of Captain Jennifer Whitmore, who never failed to deliver hope to those who needed it most." I carefully removed the panel so the plaque would be visible. Rex would want to see it, and more importantly, everyone who set foot on this ship should know whose legacy they were witnessing. The final tally on our sterling score ended up completely irrelevant. Rex had gotten exactly what he'd paid for, a ship with character, history, and many years of reliable service ahead. But more than that, he'd become the custodian of a story that deserved to be told. As the day wound down and Rex prepared to take his ship to her new berth, he shook my hand firmly. "Mac promised me something." "What's that?" "If you ever come across another ship with a story like this, you call me first." I laughed. "Rex, ships like this come along once in a lifetime, but yeah, you'll get first dibs." He climbed aboard his ship, now gleaming and perfect, but somehow more honest than when she'd arrived. Through the viewport, I could see him settling into the captain's chair, his hands running over controls that had once responded to Jennifer Whitmore's touch. He was grinning like a man who'd found treasure, which in a way he had. Jazz stood beside me as we watched the celestial Starburst 7, formerly the Midnight Runner, gracefully exit the restoration bay. "Think he knows how lucky he got?" "Oh, he knows," I said. "That's a man who understands that sometimes the best deals aren't about the numbers, they're about the story." "Speaking of which," Jazz said, pulling up his pad, "we've got another interesting case coming in tomorrow. Lady claims she's got a racing yacht that belonged to some famous pilot. Says it's only got 2,000 hours on it." I groaned. "Let me guess, she won't let us inspect it first." "You know it." "Well," I said, heading back to my office, "at least it keeps life interesting. Run a background check on that yacht's registration. Let's see what stories it's hiding." As I settled in to review the day's documentation, I found myself thinking about Admiral Whitmore and her daughter. Two women, generations apart, united by a ship that had served them both in different ways. The daughter using it to bring hope to desperate colonies. The mother preserving it as a monument to that sacrifice. And now Rex, who would write the ship's next chapter. Knowing him, he'd probably end up running charity deliveries to those same frontier colonies, keeping Jennifer Whitmore's legacy alive in the most fitting way possible. The restoration business wasn't just about making old ships look new. It was about uncovering stories, preserving history, and sometimes bringing closure to old wounds. Today had been one of those days that reminded me why I loved this job. My comm unit chimed with a message from Rex. "Mac just found another hidden compartment. It's full of hollows and personal effects. Jennifer's things. I'm going to make sure they get to a museum, properly displayed. This ship's going to be a traveling memorial to the frontier runners. Thanks again for everything." I smiled and typed back, "Perfect idea, she'd be proud." Outside my office window, the stars twinkled in the infinite black. Each one a destination, a story, a possibility. Somewhere out there, Rex was taking the celestial Starburst 7 on her first real flight in years, her engines singing the song of freedom that every good ship knew by heart. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new mysteries to uncover. But tonight I was content, knowing we'd done right by a ship, her legacy, and the man who'd gambled everything to save her. The score on the board still showed 12-12, a perfect tie. But in truth, everyone had won today. Rex got his ship. The Admiral's secret was revealed with compassion. Jennifer Whitmore's sacrifice would be remembered, and I'd gotten to be part of a story worth telling. As I locked up the restoration bay and headed home, I made a mental note to check the collector's network more carefully. If there was one celestial with a hidden history like this, there might be others. Ships with stories waiting to be discovered, legacies waiting to be honored. The restoration business was good to me, gave me purpose and profit in equal measure. But days like today reminded me that sometimes the real value wasn't in the credits that changed hands. It was in the connections we made, the stories we preserved, and the honor we showed to those who came before. Rex sent one more message as I was walking to my transport. Mac, she handles like a dream, just made the jump to hyperspace, smoother than any ship I've ever owned. The Admiral was right. She's got many more stories left to tell. I'll make sure they're good ones. I knew he would. That was the thing about people who understood ships. They knew that every vessel was more than metal and circuits. They were repositories of dreams, witnesses to history, carriers of hope. And the celestial Starburst 7, with all her hours and all her secrets, was one of the special ones. The next morning came too soon, as it always did. Jazz was already in the bay when I arrived, prepping for our new arrival. The racing yacht was being delivered by automated tug, its owner notably absent. "Morning, boss," Jazz greeted me. "Ready for another mystery?" "Always," I said, pouring myself coffee from the industrial-sized pot we kept in the break room. "What do we know about this one?" "Registry shows it as the Solar Wind, purchased new 18 years ago by one Marcus Vendetti, the racing legend. But here's the interesting part. Vendetti died 15 years ago in a crash at the Neptune Rally. So who's our client?" "His widow, apparently. Though she wasn't his widow when he died, if you know what I mean. Married him 2 weeks before the crash." I raised an eyebrow. That's either very tragic or very suspicious. "Gets better," Jazz continued. "The Solar Wind was supposedly destroyed in that crash. This yacht has the same registration, but was listed as a total loss and insurance was paid out. So we've got a ghost ship." "Looks like it." Through the bay windows, we watched the automated tug maneuver the yacht into position. Even from a distance, I could see something was off. The lines were right for a Solar Wind class, but the proportions seemed different somehow. "Jazz, pull up the original specs for Vendetti's yacht." He did, projecting them as a hologram beside the real ship. The differences were subtle but definite. The engine housings were larger, the sensor array more elaborate, and unless I was mistaken, those were concealed weapon ports along the ventral hull. "That's not a racing yacht," I said slowly. "That's a modified courier. Someone's trying to pass off a military scout as a civilian racer. Why would anyone do that?" Before I could answer, my comm chimed with an urgent message. It was from Rex, and it was marked Priority 1. "Mac, you need to see this. Found something in Jennifer's personal effects. There's a data crystal with information about a whole network of frontier runners. They were more organized than anyone knew. They were evacuating colonists from worlds the government was abandoning, saving entire populations. And get this, Marcus Vendetti was part of it. His crash wasn't an accident. He was eliminated because he knew too much." I looked at the yacht sitting in my bay with new understanding. Jazz locked down the bay. "No one in or out until I say so." "Boss, I think we just became part of something much bigger than a simple restoration job." The yacht sat silent in the bay, its secrets waiting to be discovered. But now I knew that uncovering them might be dangerous. The frontier runners, Jennifer Whitmore, Marcus Vendetti, they'd all been part of something that someone had wanted hidden. "Jazz, get Scout and Tommy in here, full protective protocols, and send a message to Rex. Tell him we need to talk securely." As my team assembled, I studied the yacht more carefully. If I was right, this wasn't just another restoration job. This was another piece of the same puzzle that had started with the celestial Starburst 7. And somehow, I had the feeling that Admiral Whitmore had known exactly what she was doing when she sold her ship to Rex. "All right, people," I announced once everyone was present. "We're going to take this yacht apart piece by piece, document everything, and I mean everything. And nobody talks about what we find outside this bay." Scout raised her hand. "Mr. Gallagher, is this about the conspiracy theories, the ones about the government covering up the abandonment of the outer colonies?" "What do you know about that?" I asked carefully. "My uncle was on Colony 9 when the evacuation order came," she said quietly. "Except there was no evacuation, just an order to abandon. The frontier runners were the only ones who came for them." I nodded slowly. "Then you understand why this matters. Let's get to work." As we began our examination of the solar wind, I couldn't help but think about how a simple restoration job had opened a door to something much larger. Rex's gamble on an abandoned cruiser had uncovered not just a ship, but a piece of hidden history. The galaxy was full of stories. I'd always known that. But now I was beginning to understand that some of those stories were deliberately buried. And the ships that carried them were more than just vessels. They were evidence of heroism that someone wanted forgotten. The solar wind secrets would have to wait for another day, another restoration. But I knew now that every ship that came through my bay might be carrying more than just cargo, residue, and old memories. They might be carrying truth that someone, somewhere, didn't want revealed. As I worked, I thought about Rex out there in the celestial Starburst 7, continuing the work that Jennifer Whitmore had died doing. He'd wanted a ship with a story, and he'd gotten more than he'd bargained for. But knowing Rex, he wouldn't have it any other way. The restoration business had just gotten a lot more interesting, and potentially a lot more dangerous. But that was okay. Some stories needed to be told, some legacies needed to be preserved, and some heroes needed to be remembered. And if it took a bunch of ship restorers to make that happen, then so be it. We'd clean away the grime and lies, polish up the truth, and make sure the real stories got told. After all, that's what restoration was really about. Bringing things back to what they were meant to be, revealing the beauty and purpose hidden beneath years of neglect and deception. The Sterling scoreboard still showed 12-12, but I added a new line beneath it. "Truth uncovered, priceless." Jazz looked at it and grinned. "Boss, you're getting sentimental in your old age." "Maybe," I admitted, "but when you've got ships like these coming through, how can you not?" The work continued, and with each panel we removed, each system we examined, the story grew larger and more complex. The galaxy had secrets, and somehow they all seemed to be finding their way to my restoration bay. I wouldn't have it any other way.